Woohoo! Here we are, Matthew.
Hi, good morning, afternoon. Yeah,
Yeah, whatever time it is, it's a good time to talk about something that makes me want to poke my face with a fork because it's less painful to me than doing International Coaching Federation recordings, um, assessments. But you love it, so do you want to tell us something about you as an MCC coach and how you got to love doing assessments?
yeah. And I think it's important to clarify that the assessment piece came from many years before. So, I mean, I wasn't assessing recordings, 10 years ago, but certainly I've always had some kind of knack for data and looking at trends and just trying to figure things out. I mean, even beyond the professional, I remember senior year of high school, I sent a Google form to all of my friends with, what do you want for Christmas? Back when I celebrated Christmas. So I've always been in this sense of data collecting, but then also how do you make, what's it telling you? What's the surprise? You're codifying something that's hard to codify. So I think when I got into coaching and I learned about the mentor coaching assessment realm, already I was like, oh, I already like to do that. What's that all about? And so, um, yeah, I just dove head first. And it's interesting. And the more that I've been doing this, similar to what you're almost implying it, but as soon as someone says, oh, I like to do it, get him right now, because we don't.
We all hate it. And here's a guy who loves nothing more than a spreadsheet and counting up numbers and figuring out. Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
that's right.
But there's something more to it if I'm getting you right. I hear your love for data and your love for finding trends and things. Um, but you're also just a really kind person and you really care about making a difference in people's lives. And so how does that all fit together when you're listening to recordings with this ICF grid going on?
Oh, it's a beautiful question. I think it comes down to that I really do think of it as a gift that someone has given me the chance to listen to their work. Not even, it's not really a coaching conversation. I mean, of course it's coaching, but it is something that they created. Even if that just meant they pressed the Zoom button and they talked, something happened. And so it lights me up, and I think it's a big privilege for me. I really also try and, there's different avenues that you can take. So there's, of course, the objective benchmarks, but what is the unique way that you can do all of those? I don't want to hear 10 recordings in a row with everyone saying, and what's important about that?
I
Great,
know. That's
please.
the fork poking. Go ahead. If I
Yeah,
hear that one more time.
and I get it. It'll check the box. Sometimes there's a little nuance in that, but um, yeah, spice it up. Buy a thesaurus, bookmark thesaurus.com. So, and I'm always really helping people find the right words for them, and also explaining we don't just want to do this because it's in a list of 37 things we'd like to see. What does it actually contribute for the client? And how does it make the session better? I mean, if you don't really get some, I don't, even if it's a very vague outcome, at least you have something. Otherwise, it's like you've gotten into an Uber and you're just sitting there and assuming the driver's going to take you somewhere. That's dangerous. You need to put the address in. Don't need to know how to get there. You can keep an eye out, make sure you're going the right way. Otherwise, you gotta have some idea.
What bridge did we just cross? Why are we in New York?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, what are some of the things that you perceive when you're listening to these gifts? I mean, it is a really tender space. When somebody records themselves coaching, it's pretty vulnerable to show up with like, this was me doing my best work. And not only to check the boxes, but to be with a real person that I really am hoping to be a benefit to their lives. What are you hearing?
Oh, what am I hearing? Always a variety of things. It tends to be very clear when the coach and the client know each other and they have some kind of rapport. And I think that is really beautiful. The coach, there's no marker for jokes. There's no marker for sarcasm. But those things really enhance when the session's happening, and it's a breath of fresh air. There's certain things that you can just tell, like, oh, these two clearly know each other, because if you took what the coach just said, isolated it, you would think, oh my goodness, that's mean, insensitive, makes no sense. But when it's in this dialogue, you're watching two people just have a fun time. So that's really one of the things that's always a blessing, at least when I can perceive that. I don't know. They could be Oscar-winning nominees and they can be acting. I don't know. Um, I also can perceive when folks are really nervous, and it comes across usually in maybe a stutter or two when they're trying to say something, or they're doing stacking on the questions. Um, and it happens. It happens, and I think it's also really clear of, are they really trying their best? And that's really always hard to, I can't get in their head, but that's where I do lean into my intuition. Like, can I really tell that this person's trying their best? A little bit of a, what are they, je ne sais quoi? That's what I'm really I really try and pick that up. And it also is very obvious when I think they're reading off a list. And I would join you in putting a fork in my eye when it comes to that. It's like, it's going to be a long night, and we need some forks and maybe Pinot Grigio,
Implements
and
of torture. You might need a
yes,
rack.
yes,
Oh
absolutely.
man, I used to have like 15 recordings in a row that would it was a coaching school that had a 12-step
Oh,
process, and it was, how are you? How's your family? Then it was, what would you like to focus the conversation on today? What makes that important to you? What are your measures of success? And it just went on, and I was just sitting there like, I could predict with 99% accuracy what their next question was going to be, regardless of what the client was saying. And so, and I don't blame coaches necessarily for that, because there is this sort of like, in a recording, you're trying to get these points. But I do think there's better ways. I think you think there's better ways too. Before we talk about better ways, do you want to tell me some things that you would like coaches to stop doing?
oh my goodness, many. So here's the thing. I I really am an advocate for individuality, uniqueness, and finding what works for you and the client. And if you could do a little bit more of that and not so much of some other things, I think that would be great. So it's not to say some of the things I'm going to say, like, it's a forbidden list. We're not talking no banned books here. But I would like it if used very wisely, or just not use at all. So one of the first things, and we actually engaged on Facebook about this, is this beginning the call with some kind of preamble, like about what the recording is for, how it's going to be used, and not to say that info isn't important to cover, but there is an assumption prior to pressing record that you get that all sorted out. I know some assessors might like to see it, but that just comes down to their bias. It doesn't, there's no point, like, I heard them talk about this, check. And so, and that just takes up so much time. And because whether they're nervous or they've been told a script, they might get overly wordy. And then they might say something they don't really mean to say that could disqualify the whole thing, such as, everything we talk about is confidential. No, I am listening to it.
You just
I,
sent it to me. It's
I'm
not
here.
confidential, right?
Yeah. It's even better when, and again, I like to find the humor in this. I know it can be unfortunate when I tell someone, thanks to the recording, I stopped after 15 seconds because this happened. But I also just had one a couple of days ago that said, let's say it was you and I. So this recording will only stay between you and me, Christi, nobody else. Well, that's real specific. So okay, well, we got to talk
Except
about
we're on a podcast right now, and who knows,
exactly,
right?
exactly. So that's one of the
So
main.
number one thing to not do is don't lie in the first 15 seconds of your recording. And I've heard so many people show up and be like, I'm an ICF certified coach, and you're like, can I just clarify, you're not a certified coach, because you're doing this recording in the hopes that you'll get one. So how are you presenting yourself out there?
Yeah, well, that's not only that, but the terminology. I mean, people will just often say like, oh yes, I am this or I am this, and it's amazing people call themselves. I'm like, more power to you, but it's, you know, take care of this later. If you want to call yourself an ICF coach, I mean, exactly, you're not, no, probably not if you're working for First Credential, but then I would hope the person knows that. I would hope they took care of that before they press record. Like, can you imagine if we didn't schedule this podcast and we just got onto a meeting and you're like, okay, welcome to the podcast. Well, oh, okay. Yeah, let's do it. Thank you for telling me for the first time. This is a
Let me
podcast.
explain to you what a podcast is for 5 minutes so our audience can enjoy hearing about what a podcast is. Yeah. You do
Yeah.
not need to describe what coaching is in a recording for your assessment. What else do you not want to hear coaches do?
Tell me more. Say more about that. Um, I get the intention. It's to encourage the client to keep expressing themselves and sharing so that way they feel safe and vulnerable. And I believe it is 9 out of 10 times backfired, meaning the client will feel free to express themselves, but they'll give you, it's like, I think you meant to ask for a sandwich and instead you got a Thanksgiving dinner. It's like, this is, oh boy, what have I done? And sometimes when I work with coaches and they'll ask me, my client just talks so much. And there are ways to work with that. And is that their natural processing style? Or did you say something or ask something that said, please share everything on your mind? That's another one. So what's on your mind for today? Like, get back, stand back. You better get some popcorn because you're about to get a very long story. And I've seen it. I've seen like when people are well intending or they ask just some of these, it comes down to the words that we use. But you'll ask, you'll ask. That's another thing. Tell me more has never been a question. I don't know why they
Tell me
put it in.
more is a command. We're putting up our X.
Yes,
And
yes.
don't command your clients to do things.
Yeah, I tell people, if would you tell your client to clean your room? If you have kids, what's the reaction when you say clean your room? What if someone told you to go clean your room? Be like, I don't want to do it. Then don't tell them, tell me more. It's the same thing. Yeah, not exactly, but for the most part. So it, yeah, it's going to invite a very long, just too many details. I've seen it happen. I've seen someone say, so tell me more about this. And the client will talk for, 10 minutes. It's in a transcript. I have the evidence that I survived listening to that.
With no forks available.
Yeah. That's another one. And now this other one is really tricky. It's to begin a session with, hi, how are you? Because it's a nice, very kind thing. And some clients will take it a little too literally and they will just talk. And so on one hand, we're having a professional conversation. On the other hand, we are two humans getting to exchange some magic or just some connection. So I'm a big advocate of just more specific questions. So what's important to share that before you'd like to begin today, or what's showing up for you? That can be, well, that one could also invite a very long story. But I think if sometimes you say, so hi, how are you? They're really going to tell you how they are. And 20 minutes have gone by and you're like, well, we got 10 more minutes of recording. So now what?
Okay, so we're clustering a lot of these don't do right at the beginning, the first 2 minutes of a conversation, how not to start. What else
Oh,
do you hear that you want them to stop?
the word let's. So let's go
Oh,
back and talk about this. Or no, there's no let's. No, unless you're a Super Mario brother and saying, let's go. You do not need to, no, there's no let's in coaching. Unless, of course, you're playing with their language, such as, yes, I'm ready to go. Okay, let's go. What do you want to start with today? That's of course different, but let's drives me crazy. And my biggest pet peeve is the nonverbal sounds while someone is speaking. Just
uh-huh,
be quiet. Like that was
uh-huh.
fine.
Yeah,
That was fine.
yeah. No, I'm
But
doing it seriously to
oh,
drive you
okay.
nuts right now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Um,
uh-huh.
and I
Keep
think there's two.
talking.
I
Uh-huh.
I think there's. I did a demo actually where I did that. I think it really sold the point. But I think when it comes, I think many coaches do it because they think or perceive like I want my client to know that I'm listening. Totally get that. Two things. What are you so concerned about that they might not think you're listening? And two, there's other ways to do it, like using the words they just using your question. You had to have been listening to pick up those words. So when the client's speaking, just really listen and just be quiet. There's no, I call them sound effects or like chirping, like put the birds away. No, you don't need any of those sounds. Just listen. And as a client myself, I know that when I have had a coach who will say, I like it. It's like satisfying. Like, ooh, I said the right thing. I said a good thing. Let me keep talking so I get more praise. But that's not what coaching, quote unquote, should be doing to me. I should not be relying on external praise. The goal is to become more self-sufficient and trusting myself. And so, again, I'm sure it's very well-intending, well-meaning, but you don't need it. So I think those are the main ones. Actually, okay, one more. Just kidding. You actually use one in your mini demo. While I do appreciate the markers, I would, again, spice up your language. You don't have to say the way the marker is written verbatim. I mean, I think it should be a felony if you ask, and what will be your measure of success for today's conversation? Oh my God. Find a different way. I'm trying to think of what other ones there are. Yeah, just the closing, like, and what would be the best accountability for you? Well, maybe you might need to ask, would it be closing it on purpose? Would it be useful to set up an accountability measure? Or how might accountability help you, if at all? So again, the markers are there to give us a sense of what's valuable and what can we see, but it doesn't mean you have to use them verbatim. Honestly, the measure of success one's my nightmare. I'm like, oh, you poor thing. Who told you had to say it like this?
Yeah, yeah. Those rote verbatim, it's like you read the 37 PCC markers, those behavioral markers, and just did the behaviors without the presence. So what would you say to do instead if you want to, like, how would you love to hear an assessment recording open up?
Ooh, that's a great question. Number one is of course, please have fun. Find something that sounds like you. I always do recommend what I call a strong verb. It really sets the stage of what I'm inviting in a way that's not too limiting. So my favorite is, what do you want to focus on? It gets something hopefully a bit more narrow than opening so many things. One of my mentors likes to phrase, what do you want to think about? I think part of that comes from Nancy Klein's work. I do like that one. What can we work on is always a good one. And I just learned, what would you like to move forward with? That's actually I haven't heard that one in practice. I found it from a list, but I could see how that one could be really beneficial. So I think just really starting with a strong question that's hopefully going to invite something very specific, or at least specific enough. And similar to what I mentioned about the confidentiality, all you have to say, if anything, is, thank you for allowing me to record and share this session for mentor coaching and assessment purposes. Keep it vague, and then ask your next question. So I think the opening is really important. And I also really encourage folks to, after they ask whatever their first question is, the second question does not necessarily have to be immediately, so what would be a great outcome? I mean, if someone just told you a vulnerable story, you're like, oh my goodness, like I got into a car accident, now I have to buy a new car, and then I just found out that my mailbox was stolen, and the zebra that I bought is giving me the cold shoulder.
Happens to me all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and what would be a great outcome for today? It's like if you went to the doctor and the doctor asked you, nice to see you today. So what prescription would you like today? I don't know. I'm sick. Can we talk about what's going on first?
Yeah. So if I'm getting you, like, if you say anything at all, just say, hey, thanks for letting me record. Then you go into the kind of question that's a human connection, but it also gets them into the coaching session to focus. Like, do you need anything before we get started? How's your energy coming in today? What would you like us to talk about? what would you love to leave this session with today? Something that gets them, like, we're having a purposeful conversation. That's a coaching conversation, not a rambling story
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely. I will say though, I would also say be careful with talk about. Um, I think you can frame it really well, but I've also seen talk about like, well, let me tell you what's going to happen today. And you're like, oh boy. So not to say any of the verbs that I recommended are going to prevent that. You could ask the best opening question. Your client will still give you a dissertation about their weekend. It happens.
And it's fine. Some people, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've coached who literally had no one in their life sit and listen to them for 10 minutes ever. And so
Yeah,
even just someone listening, um, and I think there's ways of listening at a really deep level of presence that even if they are just telling you, about their zebra giving them the cold shoulder, there's something about the way we can be as people together that can be building trust and safety so that when they get to the real meat of what they're, not the zebra meat because that would be bad, but the real meat of what they want to talk about, you've got some legs to stand on. And again, not the zebra legs,
right.
your own
No,
legs.
yeah, and that's very true. And so, it's not to say if you're recording a session and the client begins with a 10-minute story, like, all right, toss it out. I mean, there there could be something there. I mean, it really could give you a lot of context and the valuable data you need to help them move forward. I think one thing that I've been also practicing a lot is really not so much listening to exactly like what's the gist of it, but then in what order are they telling me things and how are they saying it? Did their voice really change when they got to that zebra? Again, I make up ridiculous metaphors. It sounds like we're off to a great start with the zebra one. Um, what when they were describing everything, what had the most energy? What was a by the way this happened? And then without getting super analytical, which one of the many topics did it seem like they spent the most time talking on? And what might that mean? And it's not our job to decide, but it's to offer. Like, I hear a lot's going on with your car, the zebra, and the mailbox. Um, I also couldn't help but notice that there was a lot of energy in your voice when you talked about the zebra. What's happening for you right now after sharing all that? Beautiful. You don't have to oh God, don't summarize word for word. One of my mentors calls it giving the weather reports. Like, and today it's gonna be sunny with a chance of this. I love that phrase. To me, another one that I've been using is it's like you're reading off the specials at a menu. And what are the specials today? Well, let me pull up the menu and read them off. No, is it meat, plant, pasta? That's all I need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. The over summarizing can really be a crutch for a lot of new coaches where you think, like, I don't know what to say next. So I'll just tell them I was listening really, really carefully to every single detail that they mentioned.
Yep.
All the stripes on the zebra are adequately gone over. Yes. So how would you understand the core competencies, like 50,000-foot view? If you were looking down at the herd of zebras, what would you want to most notice?
A human to human conversation that is on a path, and some path doesn't have to be the perfect path. So, really being with another person, listening without any distractions, being attentive to them, not taking care of them, quote unquote, but just you're in the space with them. They're not alone. Maybe they're no longer alone, at least for the 30 minutes or an hour you're together. I mean, I think that's really the heart of it. It's just being there. And similar to what you were saying, you might be the only person they have to talk to for about 10 minutes. So sure, it might be kind of hard to listen to, but also again, it's not your job to give the specials, to summarize it word by word. If you can, I'd be more impressed with, wow, what kind of brain do you have? I would love a little bit of that because I can't barely remember what happened yesterday. But certainly if just physically being there. I think there can also be so much pressure on coaches to, well, they have to get the results that they want. If they want a 10-point plan, that I have to help them get there. it is, you can help them make their way to that, but you're also not responsible if they only get to 1 or 2 out of 10. I mean, a lot of things could happen. It's their plan ultimately. So the fact that you're just there and listening and hopefully being a good person, that you're already off. I mean, it's really high up there. And so I think the competencies really emphasize that, and they give us a structure, and without getting too lost in the structure. There's, I think, a lot of interpretation and a lot of creativity. And I think it's unfortunate when folks don't necessarily learn that or become exposed to it. And that's something really important to me. The competencies work for us. We don't work for them. And so how do we find a way to do things that clearly
Say
make
that
sense?
louder for the ones in the back.
Yes. Yeah, the competencies were made to help us, I already forgot what I said. So they work for us. We don't work for them.
Yeah.
I mean, they come from, as far as I know, like some research on here's what we know our coaches are doing. And so, yeah, it's a reflect of what things happen. Now, maybe they can be worded a little bit differently or maybe add some more nuances just to make things crystal clear. But yeah, I would say that it's at least something that we have that gives us some structure, while also emphasizing that if that structure was enough, then we wouldn't have this field because we need the human to human connection.
Yeah, I have my soapbox about I do not want to get turned into an AI bot. I mean, the more the ICF standardizes behaviors, the more teachable it is for a computer to do it. And I am just a firm believer in, we're listening from the heart, and we can do a lot of, I even notice blink rate, breathing rate, where's the breath happening in the body. There's a lot I can do with matching physicality and really kind of entering in what is it like to be this other person, and what is it like to be you? What is your experience? And what are the beliefs underneath it that makes this feel like your only option? And what else can we imagine that could be enlarging your options and your creativity? And I don't know that any standardized list of behaviors is going to get you there. It can give you structure, like you said, but it's not going to necessarily be human just to check all the boxes. So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it reminds me of, I just recently watched Disney's Coco again, if you've ever seen it. Is that a yes or no? Smile.
My kids are older now, so
I don't see
the
how that's,
world of Disney. But
well, I don't think that's a good enough reason, but thank you. It's okay. Disney's for everybody.
You can coach me on that.
Okay, great. But it's a story of, it's about a Mexican culture, Day of the Dead, and it's a story around that. But what you're saying does not remind me of the Dead. Let me clarify. But it's the stories passed down. It's the stories passed down of like, oh, our ancestors used to do this, and I think to some degree it's also available in coaching when it comes to the competencies. Like, everything you just said, that's absolutely beautiful. And maybe face first, like, the competencies don't support this. Well, what's really happening here? What's underneath the way it's written? What's the essence of what's happening? And so it's so important that we learn from each other as coaches so we can hear things like that. To think about the blink rate, never once thought about that being a source of information. But now that you said it, I'm now going to be aware of it. It's like when someone asks you, how many red cars did you see today? I don't know. Well, the next time you go outside, you're going to notice every red car out there.
Yeah. Okay, so you do a lot of assessing and a lot of mentoring, and we don't want anyone torturing themselves to avoid the pain of that. And so how could we make your job so fun and crack you up and just make it hilarious for the coach, for the client, for you, while still being excellent coaches?
Ooh, yes. The first one that came up to mind is, again, one of my mentors told me she looks for what's called out of the box questions. though, that's one of the best parts. When you can take their words, or you can spin something, you can play with a metaphor, you can just do the essence of what's required in a fun, lively way. So, think about what sounds like you, and what really makes you come alive, and what makes sense for your clients. So I really want to hear that originality, because anybody can read the markers, as I said, and just ask them and kind of figure their way out. But there's so many chances just to have a lot of fun. For example, I like, in my personal life, if my friends say something kind of contradictory, I'll be like, hold on, at one point you said this, but now you're saying this, so explain yourself. So technically that's a command, and it makes them laugh. But I've also been trying a little bit to do that in coaching, be like, okay, hold on, you're saying you want this, and now you're saying you want this, so explain yourself. And they laugh. It's funny. Now, does it fit under, oh, he gave a command? Well, can you pick up on the fact that there was humor involved, the client laughed? So it's those kind of moments that I really want to hear. Um, and that's also the job of the assessor. It's to listen for what was said and where does it fit. So leave that hard job to me. I mean, don't try and say things to make it super obvious for the assessor. I mean, sure, if you want to say, like, use the word accountability, okay. I mean, we're instantly going to know where that question goes. And what are some other ways that you can say things? So it comes down to language. I'm a huge language nerd. I speak English and Spanish, and I can pretend to speak Portuguese, Italian, and French. It's fascinating. So I would say that's one of the big ones. And the other thing is, it's like, pick up on everything. Don't be afraid to, if you have if your intuition saying, I kind of want to ask about that, just try it out. Just do it. If it blows up in your face, no problem. At least you tried. So don't try and, what's the word? Like, push yourself down. Like, no, I can't ask about
Yeah.
that, and I can't ask about that, unless you're aware that you like to get into a lot of details, and I can see how that would be tricky. But the more you can ask about the person and really follow your natural curiosity, oh, please, that's a good, oh, please, just go for it. Take some risks. I think that's going to make my job listening a lot more fun. I think you're going to have a lot more fun. And it makes it a bit easier. Just, what's your gut reaction? Like, oh, why would anyone want to do that to themselves? Now, don't say it like that. Find a coach-like way to say it. It's like, that sounds very unpleasant. What do you think when I
What are you
offer that?
getting from that? Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. So it sounds like you're really wanting the coaches to just show up as a real person and actually say what they would want to say. Because we do hear that a lot with coaches being like, oh no, we're supposed to be super nice. We're supposed to be thoughtful. We're supposed to be quiet. We're supposed to agree with our clients, none of which are true. And then they put on this nice coachy facade. And then they're like, I really want to ask about some discrepancies here, but that wouldn't be nice. And you get that. Whereas there's actually, competencies 4.4 and 7.5. I'm sure you've got them all memorized.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're all about bringing yourself and saying like, huh, kind of looks like this to me. I remember one time I was coaching a couple and they were living in one country and they were like, "Oh, our therapist told us never to make any decisions while you're depressed and we're super depressed." Um and the whole first coaching session with me, they were talking with, glowing eyes and warm hearts about this other country that they had lived in before and that they wanted to live in again. And I'm like, I hate to state the obvious, but I really am hearing that you guys are very sad living in this country and you really would love to live in that country. Is that overstating it?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, I think we need our 10 sessions of coaching. I think we're just going to go move. Like, that's so obvious. And we can make decisions while we're depressed because we won't be depressed anymore if we do this obvious thing that we want. And so sometimes just being like, I'm seeing this. What about you? Are you seeing that or something else? And just say it.
That is so, so important. And yes, I do have all the markers memorized. I didn't try to. There were no study cards. It just happened. Um,
Thousands of hours later.
yeah. Well, I can also confidently say I now have all the MCC behaviors memorized. I know what all the numbers are. I didn't try to. It just happened. But that's a different story. But what you were saying is so key. I think sometimes this is the cool thing about coaching and just working with another human. It it might seem really obvious to the outside person, and it can be. And I think sometimes coaches will say that, like, really, inside they're thinking, is this really the problem? Clearly, they don't want to do this. Yeah, then maybe find a way to say it without being directive or commanding. Just offer it. And that piece about challenge, I think, is so, so important. It doesn't have to be like, we're not doing some really intense, like extreme workout. We're not in the Olympics. Like that's a challenge. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete every session. You want to do your best, but if you notice something, I mean, pick it up. And if the client really doesn't think like you're onto something, two things. One, totally fine, you move on. Two, don't forget the session is not a confined experience. There's going to be things that linger with them. So you may have asked them at the beginning or took a big risk saying, I really hear that you like bacon, but when you talk about pancakes, you get you're so alive right now. So why are you trying to like bacon so much? And they might be like, oh no, that's nothing. But I think that thought's gonna linger with them, and then after the session, they're like, oh God, I really do love pancakes more. I better go get some pancakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I was with a coach once when I was living in Paris, and I had a 2-year contract, and I was just signing on for a third year, or it was actually like another 2-year contract. And I went to talk to my coach, and I was just like, I'm signing another 2-year contract. And she goes, 2 years is a long time to be unhappy. And I was just like,
Mm.
here's your 200 euros. I'm quitting my job. Like it just wouldn't I mean, that was what, 15 years ago that she said that to me. And I can like see her face and I can hear those words. And I'm like, to this day, I'll be like, that's too long to be unhappy. Like, I don't want to be unhappy another month, let alone another 2 years. So if I'm not happy, what do I want to change? And I hadn't been thinking like that at all. I was very kind of loyal. You stick things out kind of a person. And it's like, what an interesting outside perspective that was. And that may or may not be breaking rules, but showing up as yourself and saying the obvious can sometimes be really important.
And I want to pick up on something. This is a firm belief that I have that I hope it doesn't get proven wrong, but we'll find out. I am a believer that you can do quote unquote almost anything in a coaching conversation as long as it's still coaching to some degree. And it's going to be more than fine when it comes to the assessment of the competencies. I hear that so often, like, but I can't do this because competency XYZ says this. Well, not exactly. If that's all you do the whole session, then you're just an annoying person. That's not coaching. That's just being annoying. But if there's something you want to say or do, don't let the competencies hold you back. Again, they work for us, and so it will fit there. I'll help you reveal where it fits. And so it's yeah, I really get frustrated when people are like, I don't want to break the rules. Well, yes, break them because they really aren't there. Are you coaching and being a good human being? Go for it. I think that
Mhm.
example is beautiful. I mean, and it's again, if the whole session was them just being like, you don't want to do this, you don't like this, it's like, this is not what I want to hear. But one powerful observation, like, even when you were saying that, I don't know if you saw, I put my heart here. I was like, it had an impact on me. Like, 2 years, that's a long time to be unhappy. That's quite a statement. Wow.
Yeah.
Plus one, plus one, plus one.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember when I sent in my MCC recordings and I was just at the end of my rope because I had listened to at least 50 of my recordings and every one of them I was just cringing and being like, none of these are like perfect. I always said the wrong thing at some point or whatever. And eventually I was just like, you know what? I really, really love my clients and I serve them well and I do what's best for them and I'm listening with all my heart and um, doing what I can. And I just sent in a couple of sessions where I was like, I know I really love this person and that I serve them well and we'll just see what happens. And it happened. And it was not a checkboxing. Like I was like, I don't know if I checked their boxes or not, but I know that I served this client really well. And it was a purposeful, structured conversation. And off it goes.
Oh yeah. May I share two things about that? You're getting me all
Mhm.
inspired now. Um, well, the first thing is,
I'm like the last person to inspire anyone about coaching assessments. I hate doing them so much. So I'm feeling I'm really great right now.
well, and first of all, just know that when it comes to the assessment and passing, it's never 100%. It is a little bit of everything. And especially probably for the MCC realm is you don't have to quote unquote master everything. If you're really good at something and you're just doing your best at something else, and that something else is like, that's just not going to be me. Or if it is, it's going to be 3 years. That's okay. Lean into so much at what you're good at. It is, it's such a beautiful thing. And again, let the assessor figure out where things fit because that's part of their job. And as assessor myself, I want to see you succeed. I will hunt for evidence. I will think, oh, normally this question I wouldn't count it here, but in this case, the way you did it was really cool. And if my what I tell myself, it's very dramatic, is I would go to court. If I give you a +1 on the marker, I would go to court and defend this as the unqualified, no trained lawyer that I possibly could be, based on years of law and order analysis. I will take, and so it's like I will go and look for examples. Like I want to see people succeed. So yeah, I think that's just so important that we are not worried about checking boxes. And then second thing with my MCC journey, I wanted to create my own experience, and so there was a point where I just picked 2 recordings and I sent them in. I but here's the thing, because it takes such a long time, and I have a little patience. You have to have some patience when you take like 8-hour airplanes, and I do that sometimes. I think you're doing that coming up very soon. You got to patience. But anyway, I'm overall not, patience is not my gift. So I decided to make, instead of submitting and then waiting and agonizing 18 weeks, checking every day, is it done yet? Is it done yet? I picked 2 that I thought were decent. I sent them in, and then I kept recording. And there was something about having 2 in the pipeline that really boosted my confidence and having fun. That every recording I did after submitting was, to me, I was so much more prouder of it. It was more fun. It was exciting. It was amazing. So my mental game to key, I'm going to build a resubmission library. I may fail, and I'm going to be more than okay with that. And I'm going to have a resubmission library. That way I'm filling up my time while the wait's going. I share that because it really reminds me of what you were saying is I just want to pick 2 where I love the human being and there was some structure, and let's just see what happens. And I think that is so huge at the MCC level because it's really hard to assess an art form. It's really hard. And I think we're doing the best that we can as of today. There's always room for improvement. But certainly, I never advocate for someone to really, I love, just pick 2 and see what happens. Because if both don't pass, you're going to get really valuable hopefully, you're going to get really valuable feedback on what could be different. And congratulations, you're somebody who actually applied. There are so many folks who are either never going to hit that hour or the mentor, or who knows. So celebrate that you have a chance to be in this pipeline and you threw 2 things in. And if they're crap, cool. And if there aren't, cool. Oh, just have fun with it. That's one thing that I'm always big on is have fun and find an adventure.
Well, I'm really appreciative of you, Matthew, and you're restoring my joy in the ICF process. I just remember when I got my MCC the first time, I actually went into a bit of a depression. Like it was so anticlimactic because it did take it was more than 18 weeks. It was like 20 something weeks to hear back. And I had just given up. It was, I don't know, 5 or 6 months later. And then just in the middle of my day, I got this form email saying, you have your MCC, here's the little logo you can put on LinkedIn, here's a certificate, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like a form thing. And I don't know what I was expecting, but for some reason, I thought it was going to feel like very celebratory and like, wow, only 4% of the coaches and the credentialed coaches in the world are at the MCC level. Welcome to a thought community. Here's some people you might be interested to meet. You're part of like thought leadership now in the world, and we want to induct you into some kind of a society or something. I don't know what I was thinking, but I thought there was going to be something besides a form email. And then I was like, well, now what? You're kind of at the top, and I signed up for lifelong learning, and I think learning, that's where you get the dopamine hits. And it was like, now what do I do? And so it's been fun in recent years getting to know people like you who are like, we are creating community. You've got a lot of MCC coaches in your network, and we're learning from each other, and we're reading each other's books and listening to each other's podcasts, and we are part of creating what we want to see in the ICF, and not just like, okay, here's 37 behaviors we have to do, but yeah, we teach how to make a question really, really powerful. Does that mean every question is going to be powerful, or are we going to break some rules or ask a closed question or whatever sometimes? And so it's really lovely to get to exchange between us. Anything else you want to add before we go into our wrap-up question?
Ooh, that's a very open question. I'm gonna try not to give you a 10-minute response.
Tell me more.
Oh boy. I think these conversations, it also helps me remember why I love the assessment process so much. I don't always consciously think I'm looking at a piece of art. I'm looking for just I mean, it's very subconscious. Like, I get excited. I will go like, yes, when I read it, when I'm listening to a transcript and a coach does something so creatively. And so it's helpful in these moments to really, almost like justify, why do you like this so much, Matthew? And I mean, I feel very elevated right now. This stuff is so fascinating to me and it's so fun. And so I just hope whatever coach can listen to this, I hope they can find a way to make this fun too. I know how intimidating it can be to press record and then feel like you have someone watching you the whole time. But remember that also at that moment, the recording is only for you, and you have the right to press delete and no one else will see it. So just really give yourself a lot of opportunities to fall flat on your face and laugh, and trust that the more you keep trying, even incrementally, it's going to work out, because you're a beautiful human being that chose to become a coach. Maybe you already were a coach. That's half the battle. So just keep going, and please laugh at yourself. Laugh at everything as often as you can. I mean, even to this day, I was reviewing a recording I did to send to one of my mentor coaches. I'm still getting mentor coaching. I do love this stuff, receiving and giving. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, Matthew, it was right there. Did you not see those 200 metaphors he offered? And your next question was this, Matthew.
I know that feeling.
And I can do it with humor and not a pity party. So aim for the humor.
Yeah, it's a vulnerable space to listen to yourself record and to decide to send it in. But we are coaches. We're learning, and we're gracious people, and we are we're doing some deep stuff. So we like to wrap up our podcast at Awaken with a question related to our view of spirituality, because that's one of our core values: community and spirituality and trust. And so we've been talking at kind of a humorous level about a very particular topic, and underlying it all is the kind of world that we're creating. So Matthew, what kind of world would you love to be creating even as you're doing your work, assessing recordings?
I want to create a world that's full of creativity, that's full of looking at things from a different angle. When everyone's seeing things this way, what if you saw it reverse, upside down, sideways? And how do we appreciate that the other person could see it that way? Because for some, it's just not in their wiring to be like, I have no idea how you could see this a different way, but this person could. And so I really want a world where we can celebrate those people, we can share, and we can expand that things are hardly ever just one way or the other. There's always a lot of gray, and that gray can be really, really beautiful. So I would say a world that we celebrate the gray, that we can add other colors, and that we can recognize that there are other colors in between black and white. There's a lot in the middle, and it's all got a place and a purpose. And so I think really trusting the person that you are, that we each are, and bringing that forward is really, really a gift. And continue to just be and play and laugh and epically make mistakes and fall on your face and just, but then have people around you to help you get back up and keep the laughter going. So I just really want a world that's lively and connected and I keep saying it, but fun and humorous and full of laughter. I think it's such a beautiful thing that can be really hard to find in a couple example in those depressed times. But I just wonder what that would be like if that was everywhere. If we could always see little creative things. I mean, heck, if a company can call themselves the name of a fruit like Apple, what is Apple? It's a store with technology. Oh my, then call yourself Orange. Then open a company called Banana. Open a thing called Carpet. Just have a lot of fun. So that's what I got.
Cool. Well, I love that about you, Matthew, and I love our WhatsApp chats and the way that we are in community together, and I love the fact that you bring humor and creativity and laughing at yourself and laughing at this, all these structures and rules and stuff while still honoring the spirit behind them. So thank you for being you and for being so fun and creative and bringing cool stuff to the world of the ICF. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for welcoming me here.